And welcome back to the Hot Lap. In one corner, we have Christian Horner. In the other, we have Helmut Marko. They'll be fighting for the future of the Red Bull team. Okay, it's not quite that bad. But interestingly, there are frictions between the two as reported by a number of sources. For example, planetf1.com. There's tension between Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, and this is reportedly being suggesting that Horner is looking to say adios to Helmut Marko. Now, the relationship between the two figures, it stretches back nearly 30 years. About 28 years ago, when Horner was in need of a trailer for his Formula 3000 team, he went to Austria where he met Marko. A deal was struck, and 11 years later, they would join forces to help lead Red Bull. So that relationship, though, has soured of late, with Horner having to clarify Marko's role after certain comments made about their own driver, Sergio Perez. And the atmosphere has also changed since their founder, Dietrich Mateschitz' death. So, as we know, the Perez slander is not that first indiscretion of Marko. If you've been keeping up to date on him, the 80-year-old Austrian, he's been pretty much bulletproof leading up until Dietrich's passing in that Red Bull organisation. He's kind of seen as his right-hand man, but Marko's position in the team, it became a little less concrete, let's say, when unfortunately Dietrich passed away. Now there's a new board in control of the Red Bull. It's called Red Bull, I think, GmbH. And Brazilian outlet Globo is reporting that Horner is looking for a way to get rid of Marko. But who is Helmut Marko, I hear you ask? He is basically the head of the junior division of the Red Bull team. He's in charge essentially of the juniors. But before being in charge of the juniors, he was actually an F1 driver. But not only that, he also drove in other categories. So years active in F1, two years. He had 9 entries in total, but unfortunately no poles, no wins. Best quali was 6th, best finish was 8th. But he's best known for not only racing in obviously Formula One, but he's best known probably for his Le Mans victory prior to coming to Red Bull in the 1971 Porsche. There's a picture of it. There's a picture of it there. That almost looks like Hockenheim, doesn't it? Going around so that's obviously not in 1971. That's a bit more recent, obviously. But here he is. He was great friends with Niki Lauda, apparently. And when poor old Niki passed away, he took it, like I think a lot of people took it, obviously quite bad. That's them in the past, and that's obviously a few years later of enjoying each other's company, I guess. But in the wake of his comments essentially about Perez, Horner was forced to clarify that Marko was not an employee of the Red Bull racing team and therefore not under his jurisdiction. Now, his contract, Horner stated, is with Red Bull GmbH, and Horner told the media following that race in Singapore that he's not an employee, he's not on the payroll of Red Bull Racing. To be a director, he said, doesn't mean that you're automatically an employee. As we see with other companies, if you look at who the directorships are, so his reporting line and structure is to Red Bull GmbH, so that doesn't sit on our books. So, does he want to get rid of him? I mean, we know Christian Horner has playing a bigger role in AlphaTauri, former the Scuderia Toro Rosso team, and maybe then he just wants a bit more control on who goes in and out of the Red Bull team. This has also obviously been noted on Crash.net, where Red Bull are allegedly experiencing political turmoil between Horner and Helmut. And this is obviously because the tension was obviously before the Perez comments, but it kind of like all came to a head when Horner had to, not necessarily stick up for him, but maybe, wasn't happy. And as we know, Oliver Mintzlaff, who obviously joined Red Bull after Mateschitz' death, and is quite high up in the obviously in the organisation, also he wants Marko. He wants Marko gone as well. And interestingly, Horner and also allegedly wants rid of Yuki Tsunoda, the AlphaTauri driver, a decision which would require Honda to basically write a check of 10 million, something Marko has been trying to prevent to avoid future friction with their engine supplier, which is quite interesting. And it goes into the idea that Mr. Horner wants more power, for example, covering obviously both Red Bull teams potentially. I do think he's not looking for like some kind of pension fund of retirement, but I do feel he's obviously quite passionate and disagrees, I imagine, with some of Helmut Marko's comments, which I guess fair enough. But I thought here's an interesting insight, obviously, into Helmut Marko by something I found on the internet by Rob van Tongeren, and he's put a list of his achievements, which I thought was at least notable to talk about. So Dr. Helmut Marko, as you may know, he's been a top advisor to the Red Bull team since 2005, and he's promoted drivers like Vettel, Ricciardo, and Verstappen. Without Helmut Marko, would we have Vettel, Ricciardo, and Verstappen, as renowned as they are, coming to the Red Bull team? It's an interesting thought. Maybe in a parallel universe that that never happens. So in 1971-72, Marko drove 10 F1 races for BRM and McLaren, but scored no points. His high school mate Jochen Rindt became the world champion in 1970, and there's a picture of Helmut Marko there. As I've mentioned, he's won Le Mans in a team with Van Lennep, his countryman, in a Porsche 917. Now in 1972, he drove for McLaren until he had that accident at the French Grand Prix at Clermont-Ferrand. I probably pronounced that wrong, but it was the 6th race out of 12. Now, out of 12, at a certain point in the race, he was behind the Lotus of Emerson Fittipaldi when a small stone was thrown up by one of the Lotus's wheels. Now, if I zoom in there, you can see, I believe that's his helmet there, that's obviously caused that injury, and it shattered his vision and pierced his eye and ended his driving career. And he managed to get the car to a safe stop, but his eye was lost, and he's had a glass eye ever since. Now, Helmut Marko has been around F1, as we know, for many years, and has known many, many people around F1. That's the picture of him and Lauda again. Both have sustained, and interestingly, it says here, both have sustained damage but never lost their passion for the sport, citing obviously Lauda and Helmut with what I can only imagine are absolutely horrendous accidents. So what do you guys think about Mr. Helmut Marko? He is, I think, 80 years old now, so maybe in the twilight of his years, perhaps. Is he going to retire potentially? As we know, Franz Tost is retiring as the boss of the AlphaTauri team, and you got the Ferrari guy, the former Ferrari guy, coming in. But Helmut Marko versus Christian Horner, it's going to be really interesting, isn't it? If they're going to have a political fight, you probably have to give. I imagine you'd probably have to, you give the odds to Christian Horner in that, but I guess stay tuned. It's going to be interesting. This is a crazy silly season, isn't it? But there we go. Helmut Marko versus Christian Horner. They want Marko gone. When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen at all? Stay tuned to the Hot Lap. We'll speak to you next time. Thank you very much.